Her son was accused of cheating at school until the principal realized his genius IQ matched her billionaire CEO ex-husband's child. Mrs. Thorne, your son has committed an act of academic fraud that we simply cannot overlook. I stared at Headmaster Whitmore across his mahogany desk, my hands gripping my purse so tightly my knuckles had gone white. The afternoon sun streaming through his office windows felt too bright, too cheerful for this moment. "That's not possible," I whispered, my throat constricting. "Cassian wouldn't cheat. He's never cheated on anything in his life." Whitmore slid a manila folder across his pristine desk, his expression a careful mask of professional disappointment. "We have documentation. Your son's mathematics competition entry is virtually identical to the submission from Dorian Blackwell. Same methodology, same proofs, even the same unconventional notation system. Blackwell." The name detonated in my mind like a grenade, scattering 13 years of carefully constructed safety. 13 years since I'd walked away from that life, from that man, carrying a secret that grew inside me with every mile I put between us. "My son is not a fraud." I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against hardwood. My voice came out stronger than I felt. "And if you've already decided he's guilty because he doesn't have the right last name or the right connections, then you've made a terrible mistake. Welcome back to those of you who've been on this journey with me. Your presence here means everything. If you're discovering this channel for the first time, you're about to hear one of the most extraordinary stories I've ever shared. A story about hidden genius, impossible choices, and what happens when the past you've been running from finally catches up. This is a story that will make you question everything about privilege, identity, and the fierce love of a mother who built an entire life on a foundation of secrets. I promise you won't be able to look away. If you want to know what happens when a 13-year-old boy's brilliance threatens to expose the truth his mother has protected for over a decade, stay with me. The revelations in this story left me breathless, and I know they'll do the same for you. Now, let's begin. My name is Serafina Thorne, and 3 weeks ago, I was living the life I'd carefully constructed. A modest apartment in a decent neighborhood. A job as a freelance financial consultant that paid the bills without drawing attention. A son who was brilliant beyond measure but had learned to hide it. We were invisible, safe, exactly as I'd planned. Until the day Headmaster Whitmore called me into his office and spoke the one name I'd spent 13 years running from. Let me take you back to that moment, to the beginning of everything unraveling. Headmaster Whitmore removed his glasses, polishing them with deliberate slowness. The gesture felt rehearsed, like he'd done this before with other parents, other accusations. "Mrs. Thorne, please, sit down. I understand this is distressing." I remained standing, my gaze fixed on the folder. "Show me." He opened it with the careful precision of a man who'd done this before. 2 competition entries lay side by side, both exploring advanced number theory, both presenting elegant solutions to problems that would challenge university students, let alone middle schoolers. The pages were covered in equations that looked like poetry written in a language most people would never understand. One bore my son's name, Cassian Thorne, age 13. The other, Dorian Blackwell III, age 14. "As you can see," Whitmore continued, his voice maddeningly calm, "the similarities are undeniable. Dorian submitted his entry 2 weeks before Cassian. The timeline, unfortunately, tells a clear story." My mind raced backward to the past 3 months. Cassian hunched over his desk until midnight, filling notebooks with equations that looked like art. The light in his eyes when he'd finally solved something. The way he'd tried to explain his breakthrough to me, patient with my confusion. So eager to share his joy. I'd watched him pour his heart into that entry. I'd seen the exhaustion and the triumph. "Have you spoken to Cassian about this?" My voice came out steadier than my hands felt. "I wanted to speak with you first, given the sensitivity of the situation. The unspoken truth hung between us like smoke. The Blackwell name carried weight in this city. Old money, political connections, a family tree that included senators and Supreme Court justices. Accusations against their golden boy would require ironclad evidence. The reverse, apparently, required only suspicion. "What are you suggesting happened?" I asked, lowering myself back into the chair. That my 13-year-old son somehow hacked into school systems to steal another student's work? There are several possibilities. Whitmore steepled his fingers. Perhaps they collaborated and only one was meant to submit. Perhaps Cassian gained access through less direct channels. Students talk, Mrs. Thorne. They share their work with friends. It's possible Cassian saw Dorian's entry and, consciously or unconsciously, replicated it. Or perhaps, I leaned forward, two mathematically gifted students independently solved the same problem using similar approaches, because mathematics has rules, and brilliant minds often find the same elegant solutions. Whitmore's expression conveyed polite skepticism. The kind of look that said he'd already made up his mind and this meeting was merely a formality. Mrs. Thorne, I understand this is difficult to accept, but Dorian Blackwell comes from a family of documented intellectual achievement. His father, Lysander Blackwell, was a Rhodes Scholar. His grandfather pioneered work in theoretical physics. Dorian himself has been in gifted programs since kindergarten. His cognitive abilities have been tested and verified by some of the most prestigious institutions in the country. He paused, and I knew what was coming. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he shifted in his chair, preparing to deliver the blow he thought would end this conversation. Cassian, on the other hand, has no such documented history. His academic record is solid but unremarkable. His teachers describe him as bright but unmotivated. This submission represents a significant departure from his established abilities. You must understand how this appears. Something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice on a frozen lake when the temperature starts to rise. Cassian has no documented history because I've spent 13 years making sure he stayed invisible. The words escaped before I could stop them. Because I've taught him to hide what he can do. Because the alternative was losing him to a man who would turn him into a trophy, a possession, another achievement to display on a shelf. Whitmore's eyebrows rose slightly. I'd surprised him. Good. I want to see both entries, I said quickly, trying to regain control. In detail. Every page, every calculation. And I want Cassian to have the opportunity to defend his work publicly. Mrs. Thorne, I'm trying to handle this discreetly. If we pursue a formal hearing, this becomes part of Cassian's permanent record. Expulsion becomes a real possibility. He softened his voice as if offering mercy. I'm offering you a way forward. Cassian withdraws from the competition, accepts a 0 for the project, and we move on. No permanent damage, no scandal. Just a quiet resolution that protects everyone involved. No permanent damage? I stood again, unable to contain the fury rising in my chest. You're asking my son to confess to something he didn't do, to brand himself a cheater, to carry that lie for the rest of his life, and you call that no permanent damage? I'm asking you to be realistic about your situation. The implication was crystal clear. You can't win this, not against the Blackwells, not against their money, their connections, their legacy. You're nobody, and your son is nobody, and that's just how the world works. But Whitmore didn't know what I'd already survived. He didn't know the lengths I'd gone to protect my son from a world that would devour him. He didn't know that I'd already faced down the most powerful man I'd ever met and walked away with my life and my child. Schedule the formal hearing, I said quietly. Cassian will defend his work. Whitmore's expression shifted. Surprise, then something like concern. Maybe even a hint of respect. Mrs. Thorne, I strongly advise against this. The evidence, the timeline, the disparity in documented abilities. This will not end well for Cassian. The evidence shows two brilliant students reached similar conclusions, I interrupted. Unless you can prove Cassian actually copied something, actually had access to Dorian's work, actually committed fraud, we're done here. I gathered my purse, my heart hammering against my ribs. What had I just done? Challenged the institution that held Cassian's future in its hands? Painted a target on our backs? Risked everything I'd built? But what choice did I have? Let my son be branded a cheater? Let him learn that the world would always assume the worst of him because he didn't have the right pedigree? No, not while I still had breath in my body. As I reached the door, Whitmore spoke again. One more thing. The Blackwell family has been informed of the situation. They're concerned about potential implications for Dorian's reputation. They've retained legal counsel. Of course they had. The Blackwells protected their legacy like dragons guarding gold. Any threat to their Golden Boy's image would be met with overwhelming force. Tell them to be concerned about false accusations, I replied, pulling open the door. My son didn't cheat. The hallway outside Whitmore's office felt too long, too bright. My legs carried me forward on autopilot while my mind spun in circles. How would I tell Cassian? What would this mean for his future at Westbridge Academy, the school he'd earned his way into through sheer determination? And beneath those immediate fears lurked something deeper, more primal. What if this investigation somehow connected Cassian to Lysander Blackwell? What if the man I'd fled from 13 years ago finally discovered the son he never knew existed? The drive home felt endless. Every red light lasted an eternity. Every turn brought me closer to a conversation I wasn't ready to have. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the streets, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. I pulled into our apartment complex, a modest building in a neighborhood that was safe but not prestigious. Exactly the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions. I sat in the car for a moment longer, staring at our third-floor window, gathering my strength. I needed to be strong now. For Cassian. He was waiting in his room, surrounded by textbooks and papers covered in his precise handwriting. His laptop displayed equations that made my head spin, even after all these years of watching him work. When he looked up, I saw fear in his gray eyes that mirrored his father's, though Cassian had never met the man. Mom. His voice cracked slightly. Headmaster Whitmore called me to his office today. He said I cheated. He said my entry looks exactly like Dorian Blackwell's entry. He said I copied it. I sat beside him on his bed, choosing my words carefully. Tell me about your entry, sweetheart. How did you develop your approach? The words tumbled out, passion overriding anxiety. I was reading about Fermat's last theorem, and I got curious about modular forms. I found this paper by a mathematician at Princeton, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, that explained elliptic curves in a way that finally made sense. So I wanted to see if I could apply similar principles to a different class of problems. I spent weeks just thinking about it, working through different approaches in my head before I even started writing anything down. He reached for his notebook, flipping through pages of dense calculations. I know it looks complicated, but once you understand the underlying structure, it's actually beautiful. See, here's where I realized that if you approach the problem from a topological perspective first, instead of starting purely algebraically, the whole thing opens up. I can show you the progression, every step I took, every dead end I hit before I found the right path. Cassian, I stopped him gently. I believe you. But there's something you need to know. His expression shifted, suddenly wary. What? Your entry is nearly identical to Dorian Blackwell's. Not just similar, nearly identical. Same methodology, same notation, same approach to solving the problem. Cassian's face paled. But that's impossible. I did this completely on my own. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't share my work. I didn't even tell you what I was working on until I was almost finished. I know you did. I squeezed his hand. But we need to prove it. And that's going to be difficult. How? His voice dropped to a whisper. It's my word against his. And he's a Blackwell. His family has everything. Money, connections, reputation. Nobody will believe me over him. The resignation in his voice cut deeper than any accusation. How many times had I taught him to work twice as hard for half the recognition? How many times had I watched him dim his brilliance to avoid standing out? How many times had I told him that the world wasn't fair, that people like us had to be careful, that drawing attention was dangerous? I'd thought I was protecting him. But maybe I'd been teaching him to accept defeat before the battle even began. They'll believe you, I said firmly, because we're going to prove it. We're going to show them exactly how brilliant you are. And they won't be able to deny it. I took a deep breath. The moment had arrived. The conversation I'd rehearsed 1,000 times but prayed would never be necessary. But first, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Cassian stared at me, confusion shifting to concern. Mom, what's wrong? You look like you're about to tell me someone died. It's about your father, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Not the story I told you about him dying in a car accident before you were born. That wasn't true. His hands stiffened in mine. He's alive? Yes. The word hung between us, heavy with 13 years of deception. Your father is Lysander Blackwell. Cassian's eyes widened, comprehension dawning slowly. I watched him process the information, his analytical mind working through the implications. The venture capitalist? The one who's always in the financial news? The one who just bought that tech company for $200 million? I nodded. And Dorian Blackwell, the boy with the identical competition entry, is your half-brother. Cassian pulled his hands away, standing abruptly. He paced the small room, processing this revelation with the same methodical focus he applied to his mathematics. I watched him move, saw the moment understanding clicked into place. That's why our entries are similar, he whispered. We think the same way. We have the same brain, the same way of seeing patterns. It's genetic. Then, more sharply. Why did you lie to me? For 13 years you let me believe my father was dead. Why? To protect you. I remained seated, giving him space. 13 years ago, I worked as a financial analyst at a firm in Manhattan. Your father was a client. Brilliant, charismatic, ambitious. We fell in love, or what I thought was love. I smiled sadly at the memory. He was magnetic, Cassian. When Lysander Blackwell focused on you, it felt like standing in sunlight. Everything else faded away. We married quickly, too quickly. I was 26 and thought I'd found my fairy tale. What happened? Cassian asked quietly, still pacing. I realized I wasn't his partner. I was his acquisition. Another asset in his portfolio. The old pain surfaced, sharp even after all these years. Lysander doesn't love people, Cassian. He collects them. I was the accomplished wife who looked perfect at fundraisers, who could discuss market trends with his colleagues, who had the right education and the right appearance. But when I tried to have my own opinions, my own career ambitions, when I wanted to be more than just an ornament in his life, that wasn't what he wanted. Cassian stopped pacing, turning to face me. So you left him? I planned to. Then I discovered I was pregnant with you. I took a deep breath. And I overheard a conversation between Lysander and his attorney. There was a clause in our prenuptial agreement, one buried in legal language I hadn't fully understood when I signed it. It would give him primary custody of any children if I initiated divorce proceedings. His lawyer was explaining how they'd structured it specifically to prevent a wife from leaving with his children. Cassian's brow furrowed. He would have taken me from you? Not just taken you. He would have shaped you into his image. Another achievement to display, another genius to add to the Blackwell legacy. You would have been raised by nannies and tutors, molded into the perfect heir, taught that your worth was measured by your accomplishments and your ability to enhance the family reputation. My voice cracked slightly. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let him turn you into a trophy. So you ran, Cassian concluded, connecting the pieces with the same logical precision he applied to everything. Changed your name back to Thorne. Started over where he couldn't find us. Yes, I withdrew the money I'd saved separately, bought a bus ticket, and disappeared. I made sure there was no trail, no forwarding address, no mutual friends, nothing he could use to track us. I changed my phone number, closed my social media accounts, cut ties with everyone who knew both of us. I made us invisible. The silence stretched between us, filled with 13 years of secrets and sacrifices. Does he know about me? Cassian finally asked. No. As far as Lysander Blackwell knows, I simply vanished. He probably assumed I'd found someone wealthier, someone more powerful. His ego wouldn't allow him to consider any other explanation. The idea that someone would walk away from him, from his money and his name, and his world, that would be incomprehensible to him. And now his other son, my brother, goes to my school? Cassian shook his head in disbelief. What are the odds of that? Astronomical, I admitted. When you earned that scholarship to Westbridge, I never imagined. I never thought to check if the Blackwells had connections there. I was so focused on the opportunity for you, on getting you into a school that could challenge you even a little bit, that I didn't think about who else might be there. Cassian stood again, moving to his desk where his competition entry lay scattered across the surface. He picked up one of the pages, staring at his own handwriting. The entries look similar because we're similar. His voice grew stronger. Mom, what if we both inherited the same way of thinking, the same mathematical intuition? What if it's not just that we're both smart, but that we're smart in exactly the same way? It was the question I'd been circling since seeing those entries side by side. What were the odds that two boys, raised in completely different worlds, would independently develop nearly identical approaches to the same complex problem? Unless they shared more than just DNA, unless genius, like eye color or height, could be inherited in specific patterns. There's something else, I said slowly. When Dorian was younger, Lysander had him tested extensively. The results made headlines in educational circles. IQ of 168, 99.98 percentile. They called him a prodigy. There were articles in magazines, interviews on news programs. Lysander made sure everyone knew his son was exceptional. Cassian absorbed this silently. I watched emotions flicker across his face. Fear, curiosity, something that might have been hope. Do you think I could be tested to prove I didn't cheat? If I could show that I have the same kind of abilities, that I'm capable of doing this work on my own, maybe they'd believe me. Would you want that? To be tested? To have your abilities documented and measured? He nodded firmly. If I'm being accused of stealing someone else's genius, maybe it's time to prove I have my own. The determination in his voice made my throat tighten. My son, who had been taught to hide, to blend in, to keep his extraordinary mind carefully concealed, was ready to step into the light. Ready to risk everything I'd tried to protect him from. We'd need someone reputable, I said. Someone whose results couldn't be questioned. Someone with credentials so impressive that even the Blackwells couldn't dismiss them. And that kind of testing is expensive. The emergency fund, Cassian added pragmatically. We'd need to use it, wouldn't we? The emergency fund. $7,000 saved over years of extra freelance work and careful budgeting. Our safety net if we ever needed to run again. Money I'd set aside in case Lysander ever found us, and we had to disappear in the middle of the night. This is an emergency, I replied. Later that night, after Cassian had finally fallen asleep, I sat alone in our small kitchen. My laptop was open to an article about Lysander Blackwell's latest acquisition, a tech startup valued at $200 million. His face stared back at me from the screen, older now, silver threading through his dark hair, but still unmistakably the man I'd once pledged my life to. And beside him in the photo stood a boy who could have been Cassian's twin. Dorian, holding an award for some mathematical achievement, his expression serious and composed. The same gray eyes, the same sharp features, the same way of holding himself, like he was always thinking 3 steps ahead. I closed the laptop, my decision made. If we were going to fight this accusation, we needed proof beyond doubt. Even if it meant risking the secret I'd guarded for 13 years. The next morning, I called Dr. Helena Voss, a neuropsychologist who specialized in gifted assessment. I'd found her name in my research, seen her credentials. Harvard, MIT, Cambridge. 40 years of experience, publications in every major journal. If anyone could provide results that couldn't be disputed, it was her. Her consultation fee alone would consume a significant portion of our emergency fund, but her reputation was impeccable. No one, not even the Blackwells, could dispute her findings. I have an opening next Thursday, her assistant told me. Dr. Voss can see Cassian at 9 a.m. The full assessment will take approximately 7 hours spread over 2 days. The fee is $3,000, due at the time of service. I swallowed hard. $3,000. Nearly half our emergency fund. We'll take it, I said firmly. When I picked Cassian up from school that afternoon, his shoulders were hunched, his gaze fixed on the ground. Other students whispered as we walked to the car. I saw them pointing, saw the way they looked at him. Not with sympathy, with suspicion, with judgment. They know, he said quietly once we were inside the car. Someone leaked that I'm being investigated for cheating. Everyone's talking about it. Kids I've known for 2 years won't even look at me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Did you see Dorian today? He wasn't in school. Probably being kept away from the scandal. Can't have the Blackwell air associated with something as sordid as a cheating investigation. Cassian's laugh held no humor. Funny, isn't it? We share the same father, the same mind, but his life couldn't be more different from mine. He gets private tutors and prestigious programs and everyone assuming he's brilliant. I get accused of fraud for doing the same work he does. I glanced at my son. Brilliant, resilient, kind, despite everything. I felt fierce pride surge through me. Different doesn't mean better, I told him. We have an appointment with Dr. Helena Voss next Thursday. She's going to evaluate your cognitive abilities. She's one of the most respected neuropsychologists in the country. What if I'm not as smart as him? Cassian voiced the fear quietly. What if his entry really is better, and I just coincidentally came up with something similar? What if I'm not actually a genius, just someone who got lucky? That's not possible, I said firmly. You created that entry from scratch. I watched you work on it for months. But what if he inherited more of our father's intelligence than I did? His voice dropped. What if I'm just the disappointing son? The one who wasn't good enough to keep? Maybe that's why you left. Maybe you knew I wouldn't measure up. The vulnerability in his question broke my heart. Listen to me. I pulled the car over to look directly at him. I didn't leave because of you. I left because of him. Because I knew what he would do to you, how he would treat you. Your worth isn't measured by an IQ score. It isn't measured by comparison to anyone else, including your half-brother. You are extraordinary exactly as you are. But if my score isn't high enough to prove I could do the work independently, then we'll find another way, I promised. We always do. But Cassian, I need you to understand something. This test isn't about proving your worth to me or to yourself. It's about proving to people who've already made up their minds that they were wrong about you. That's all. The week crawled by, each day bringing new whispers, new sidelong glances in the school hallways. Cassian withdrew into himself, his usual enthusiasm for learning dimmed by suspicion and doubt. I watched him come home each day, a little more defeated, a little more convinced that the world had already decided who he was, and nothing he did would change that. By Thursday morning, we were both exhausted and on edge. Dr. Voss's office was in a converted brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that spoke of old money and established reputation. The walls were covered with credentials, degrees from Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, certifications from organizations I'd never heard of, but that sounded impressive. Published papers with titles I couldn't understand. Dr. Voss herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who greeted us with brisk efficiency. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that seemed to see right through you. Mrs. Thorne, Cassian, please, sit down. We settled into chairs across from her desk. The office smelled like old books and coffee. I've reviewed Cassian's academic history, she said, spreading papers across her desk. His grades are good, but not exceptional. His teachers describe him as bright but unmotivated. One teacher noted that he seems bored in class but doesn't cause disruptions. Another mentioned that he finishes tests quickly but doesn't seem interested in extra credit or advanced work. Tell me, Mrs. Thorne, what do you see at home? I met her gaze steadily. A boy who reads mathematical proofs for pleasure, who taught himself programming languages before he was 10, who composes music using algorithmic patterns I don't pretend to understand, who can solve complex equations in his head while we're driving to the grocery store. Dr. Voss leaned forward. And yet his school records show none of this. Why? Because I've been careful, I admitted, the words painful to speak aloud. I've never pushed him to stand out. I've never sought gifted programs or accelerated classes. I've actively discouraged him from demonstrating his full abilities in school. I've kept him deliberately average. Why? Her question held no judgment, only professional curiosity. I glanced at Cassian, who nodded slightly, giving permission. Because his father has unlimited resources and a pathological need to control everything exceptional. If Lysander Blackwell ever learned he had another son, especially one with abilities matching his acknowledged heir, He would destroy my life to claim him. So I taught Cassian to hide what he could do. Dr. Voss was quiet for a moment, studying both of us. That must have been isolating for him. The words struck deeper than I expected. I thought of Cassian spending lunch periods alone because he couldn't relate to other kids his age. Of the light dimming in his eyes whenever he had to pretend not to know an answer. Of the person he might have become if I hadn't been so afraid. I did what I thought I had to do, I said. And now? Dr. Voss asked. Now he's being accused of being something he isn't. A fraud. A cheater. So maybe it's time to stop hiding. Dr. Voss turned to Cassian. The testing will take approximately 7 hours, spread over today and tomorrow. It will assess various cognitive domains. Verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning, working memory, processing speed, and several others. This isn't just about finding a number. It's about understanding how your mind works, how you process information, how you solve problems, what your strengths and weaknesses are. Cassian nodded, his expression serious. I'm ready. One more thing, she added. Don't try to perform below your ability. Don't try to hide what you can do. I'll be able to tell if you're holding back, and it will invalidate the results. For the first time in your life, I need you to show me everything you're capable of. A faint smile crossed Cassian's face. For the first time in my life, I don't have to pretend. Have you ever built your entire life around a single secret, only to watch it begin to unravel? Have you ever taught someone you love to hide their light, only to realize that the darkness you created might be worse than the danger you feared? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. The testing took 7 hours, spread over 2 days. I waited in Dr. Voss's reception area, watching the clock, wondering what Pandora's box I'd opened. The receptionist offered me coffee 3 times. I accepted once, then let it grow cold in my hands while I stared at the wall. After the first session, Cassian emerged with a quiet energy I rarely saw. Something between exhaustion and exhilaration. How was it? I asked, searching his face for clues. Different, he replied. She kept giving me harder and harder problems. Usually tests get boring because they're too simple, but these made me think. Really think. There was this spatial reasoning test where you have to mentally rotate 4-dimensional objects and pattern recognition sequences that kept changing their underlying rules. And this incredible logic puzzle with variables that seemed impossible until you realized the puzzle itself was telling you how to solve it. He stopped suddenly, glancing at me. Sorry, I'm boring you. You're not boring me, I said honestly. I love seeing you excited again. That's just it, Mom. His voice softened. I am excited. Not about the test exactly, but about not pretending. Do you know how exhausting it is to always calculate exactly how well to do? Not too perfect to stand out, but not too average to raise questions. Always monitoring myself, always holding back. It's like running a race with weights on your ankles. The question hung between us, heavy with years of unintended consequences. I'd taught my son to dim his light to keep him safe. What else had I taught him in the process? I never wanted to limit you, I said finally. I just wanted to protect you. I know. He reached over and squeezed my hand. But maybe after this, things can be different. I couldn't answer that question yet. Everything depended on what happened next. On the drive home after the second session, Cassian was more talkative than he'd been in weeks. There was this section on mathematical reasoning that was actually fun. Dr. Voss would give me a problem and then ask me to explain my thought process out loud while I solved it. She wanted to understand not just if I got the right answer, but how I got there. What patterns I saw, what connections I made. It was like she was mapping my brain. He paused. She asked me about the competition entry, had me walk through my entire approach, explain every decision I made. She took notes the whole time. I think she believes me, Mom. I think she knows I didn't cheat. 3 days later, Dr. Voss called me back to her office. Alone. Her expression was carefully neutral as I took a seat. But I could see something simmering beneath her professional demeanor. Excitement, maybe. Or concern. I couldn't tell which. Mrs. Thorne, she folded her hands precisely on her desk. I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is exceptionally rare. In 40 years of practice, I've evaluated thousands of children, gifted children, profoundly gifted children, children with learning disabilities, children with cognitive impairments. I've seen perhaps 10 cases like this. My mouth went dry. Like what? Cassian scored 171 on the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale. She slid the official results across her desk. That places him in the 99.99 percentile. For context, that's 3 points higher than Dorian Blackwell's documented IQ. The room seemed to tilt. I stared at the paper in front of me, at the numbers and graphs that supposedly quantified my son's mind. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's documented right here. She tapped the paper. Cassian isn't just gifted, Mrs. Thorne. He's what we call profoundly gifted. We're talking about 1 in a million cognitive ability. The competition entries didn't look similar because one copied the other. They looked similar because both boys have minds wired to see patterns and solutions that most people simply cannot perceive. I stared at the numbers and graphs, trying to process what they meant. 171. 3 points higher than Dorian. Higher than his father's golden boy, the child who'd been groomed and tested and celebrated his entire life. There's something else, Dr. Voss continued. I pulled the published test results for Dorian Blackwell. They were featured in several educational journals when he was tested at age 7. The overlap in cognitive patterns is remarkable. Not just the IQ score, but the specific areas of strength. Mathematical intuition, spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, abstract thinking. These boys don't just share a father. They share an extremely rare genetic inheritance. What does this mean for the plagiarism accusation? I've taken the liberty of reaching out to Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Princeton mathematician whose paper Cassian cited in his entry. I sent her Cassian's work. She's reviewed it and is willing to testify that it demonstrates independent mastery, not plagiarism. She said, and I quote, "This is the work of a mind that understands the underlying principles at a graduate level. Additionally, I've had a forensic document analyst examine Cassian's notebooks. The progression of his work, the dates, the evolution of his thinking, it all confirms that this entry was developed over months, not copied in days." I couldn't speak, couldn't process what this meant for our carefully constructed life. Mrs. Thorne, Dr. Voss leaned forward, her expression serious. Your son has been operating at perhaps 40% of his capacity. The cognitive strain of constantly monitoring his performance, of deliberately underachieving, it's like asking an Olympic athlete to pretend they can barely walk. The psychological toll of that kind of sustained self-suppression can be significant. I was trying to protect him, I whispered. I understand that. But you need to ask yourself, what has that protection cost him? And what will it cost if you continue? I drove home in a daze, Dr. Voss's words echoing in my mind. 171. Profoundly gifted. 1 in a million. Operating at 40% capacity. I'd thought I was keeping Cassian safe. But maybe I'd been keeping him in a cage. The formal hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday in Westbridge Academy's main conference room. A space designed to intimidate with its dark wood paneling and portraits of distinguished alumni. Men in suits staring down from the walls, their expressions stern and judgmental. The night before, I found Cassian in his room, surrounded by his competition materials, meticulously organizing everything. His notebooks arranged chronologically. His reference materials tagged and highlighted, his final entry printed and bound. Are you ready? I asked from the doorway. Almost. He didn't look up. I've been thinking about something. When we go tomorrow, everyone will be focused on proving I didn't copy Dorian. But what if that's the wrong approach? What if instead of defending myself against the accusation, I go on offense? Show them not just that I didn't cheat, but that I'm capable of work that goes beyond what either of us submitted? I stepped into the room. What do you mean? Dr. Voss said I've been operating at 40% capacity. What if I show them the other 60%? What if I demonstrate understanding that couldn't possibly come from copying someone else's work? He finally looked up at me. I've been thinking about an extension to the problem. A way to generalize the solution to a broader class of equations. If I can present that, show them work that goes beyond what Dorian submitted, they'll have to admit I understand the material at a fundamental level. When had my 13-year-old become wiser than me? That's brilliant, I said. But are you sure you want to do that? Once you show them what you're capable of? They're going to find out anyway, Mom. The test results will be part of the hearing. Everyone will know my IQ score. There's no going back to being invisible now. He smiled slightly. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. The next morning, we arrived at Westbridge Academy 30 minutes early. Dr. Voss met us at the entrance, carrying a leather briefcase that presumably contained Cassian's test results and her professional assessment. Remember, she said quietly, you're not on trial, Cassian. You're presenting evidence of your capabilities. Stand tall, speak clearly, show them who you are. We entered the conference room to find it already occupied. Headmaster Whitmore sat at the head of the long table, flanked by two board members I recognized from school events. Dr. Voss took a seat on our side of the table. Across from our assigned seats sat a boy who could have been Cassian's slightly older reflection. Dorian Blackwell. Same gray eyes, same sharp features, same way of holding himself with careful composure. Beside him sat a striking woman in her 40s, perfectly coiffed and dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Evangeline Blackwell, Lysander's second wife. And beside them, a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit who could only be their attorney. Cassian faltered momentarily at the sight of his half-brother, but quickly composed himself. I squeezed his shoulder gently. Mrs. Thorne? Whitmore nodded curtly. And Cassian. Thank you for joining us. We're here to review the allegations of academic dishonesty regarding the National Youth Mathematics Competition. Mrs. Thorne has requested her son be allowed to defend his work. Before he could continue, Evangeline Blackwell interrupted, her voice perfectly modulated to convey both authority and disdain. This is absurd, she stated, gesturing dismissively toward Cassian. My son has a documented IQ of 168. He's been mentored by Fields Medal winners, has published in youth mathematics journals, has been in gifted programs since he was 5 years old. This boy comes from nowhere, with no documented history of exceptional ability, and we're supposed to believe he independently created work that matches my son's? She gave a delicate snort. The mathematical sophistication alone would challenge most graduate students. The idea that some random scholarship student with average grades suddenly produced genius-level work is laughable. The dismissal in her tone ignited something in my chest, but before I could respond, a quiet voice cut through the tension. Actually, his proof is more elegant than mine. Every head turned toward Dorian. He sat up straighter, his gaze fixed on Cassian with something like fascination. I've been studying both entries all week, he continued. We approach the same problem from similar angles, but his solution to the modular form application is cleaner. He used fewer steps and achieved a more general result. I couldn't figure out how he did it until I saw his lemma on page 9. It's brilliant. More efficient than my approach. Dorian, honey, Evangeline began, but her son raised a hand. I'm not saying he copied me. I'm saying he didn't. Nobody who copied would make the work better. They'd replicate it exactly, or more likely make it worse because they wouldn't fully understand it. His entry shows deeper understanding in some areas than mine does. The attorney tried to regain control. Nevertheless, the timeline shows I submitted first, Dorian interrupted, his voice growing stronger. But submission dates don't prove creation dates. I started my entry 3 months before the deadline. Did anyone ask when Cassian started his? All eyes turned to Cassian. With steady hands, he pulled out his worn notebook, flipping to pages filled with notes, calculations, and dated entries. I started in July, he said, his voice growing stronger. 4 months before the deadline, I can provide witnesses. My mom's colleague saw me working on calculations during my mom's evening shifts when I had to come to her office. The security guard at our building saw me working in the lobby when it was too hot in our apartment. I have dated drafts, progression of ideas, dead ends I explored before finding the right approach. Dr. Voss stepped forward, placing her official report before Headmaster Whitmore. I'm Dr. Helena Voss, and I've conducted a comprehensive cognitive evaluation of Cassian Thorne. Her voice carried the weight of 40 years of authority. His IQ score is 171, placing him in the 99.99 percentile. Additionally, Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Princeton has reviewed Cassian's work and confirmed It demonstrates independent mastery of advanced concepts. I also have a statement from a forensic document analyst confirming all work in Cassian's notebooks was created over a period of months, not days. The silence that followed was absolute. Evangeline Blackwell had gone pale. Headmaster Whitmore stared at the report as if it might explode. The attorney shuffled papers aimlessly, clearly not prepared for this development. "That's higher than my son's score," Evangeline finally said, her voice barely audible. 3 points higher," Dr. Voss confirmed, "but I want to be clear. Both boys are exceptionally gifted. The difference between 168 and 171 is statistically negligible. What's remarkable is how similar their cognitive profiles are. Same areas of strength, same patterns of thinking, same approach to problem solving." She let that sink in before continuing. "What you're seeing in these entries isn't plagiarism. It's parallel genius. Two minds wired remarkably similarly, approaching the same problem and arriving at nearly identical solutions independently." Dorian was staring at Cassian now with undisguised fascination. "How did you solve the lemma on page 9? I struggled with that for weeks before I found an approach that worked." Cassian hesitated, then pulled out his notebook, showing Dorian his work. "I realized if you approach it from a topological perspective first, instead of starting purely algebraically, the structure becomes clearer. See here, if you map the problem onto a different geometric space first." And just like that, the two boys were bent over the notebook together, speaking a language of symbols and theories that left everyone else in the room behind. They moved in sync, finished each other's sentences, understood concepts without needing full explanations. Watching them, I felt my carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. They were so clearly brothers. Not just in appearance, but in the way they thought, the way they communicated, the effortless connection forming between them. Nature had prevailed over nurture in ways I never could have imagined. But it was Evangeline Blackwell's expression that truly chilled me. As she watched the boys interact, calculation replaced her initial shock. Her gaze darted between them, taking in their similar features, their matching mannerisms, the way they fell into sync so naturally. I recognized the moment realization dawned. Her eyes widened slightly. Her perfectly manicured hand tightened on the table's edge. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw understanding crystallize in her expression. She knew. Headmaster Whitmore cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the room. "In light of this evidence, I believe we can conclusively say that no plagiarism occurred. Cassian Thorne's entry was his own work, created independently. The similarities between the two entries can be attributed to, as Dr. Voss explained, parallel thinking between two exceptionally gifted students." "An apology isn't enough," I said firmly, finding my voice. "My son was called a fraud in front of his peers. His reputation was damaged. I want a formal exoneration, a public announcement clearing his name, and a written apology from this institution for failing to investigate properly before making accusations." "Mrs. Thorne," Whitmore began, his tone placating, "and I want to know what kind of institution sees two brilliant entries and immediately assumes the child from the less wealthy family must be the fraud." My voice remained steady despite the anger coursing through me. "What does that say about your values? About the message you're sending to students about who deserves the benefit of the doubt?" Evangeline Blackwell stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This meeting is over." She grabbed Dorian's arm. "We're leaving, now." But Dorian pulled away, still looking at Cassian's notebook. "Did you really teach yourself number theory from library books?" Cassian nodded. "And online lectures. MIT OpenCourseWare has an incredible mathematics series. Professor Strang's linear algebra course changed how I think about mathematical structures. My dad pays for private tutors who studied under Terence Tao," Dorian said, something like wonder in his voice. "And you're still smarter than me." "I'm not smarter than you," Cassian replied quickly. "We're just similar. We think the same way." The word hung in the air, weighted with meaning neither boy fully grasped yet. But Evangeline Blackwell understood. I watched realization crystallize in her expression as she looked between the two boys, seeing what I'd hoped would stay hidden forever. the resemblance, the matching genius, the way they fell into sync so naturally. It all pointed to one impossible truth. "Who is Cassian's father?" she asked, her voice quiet but dangerous. I stood, placing myself between her and my son. "That's none of your concern. If what I'm thinking is correct, it's very much my concern." Her voice rose slightly. "My husband has another son, another heir with a genius IQ, and you've been hiding him." The room erupted. Whitmore tried to restore order. The board members exchanged alarmed glances. The attorney was speaking urgently into his phone. Dr. Voss moved to shield both boys from the chaos. "I think we should continue this discussion privately," I suggested, my eyes locked with Evangeline's. "There's nothing to discuss," she snapped. "We need a DNA test, immediately." "No," I said firmly. "You need nothing. Cassian is my son. I have sole custody, full parental rights. His biological father has no legal claim because he was never listed on the birth certificate, never acknowledged paternity, never had any involvement in his life. You can't test him without my permission, and I'm not giving it." Lysander doesn't know he exists," I interrupted, lowering my voice. "And if you're smart, you'll keep it that way." Her eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice." I softened my tone deliberately. "Think about what you're suggesting. If you tell your husband about Cassian, what happens to your son?" I let the implication hang between us. "Right now, Dorian is unique, special, the only genius heir to the Blackwell legacy. But if there are two of them, and one scored higher on the test that your husband values above all else, what do you think happens?" Lysander Blackwell was many things, but subtle wasn't one of them. He collected the best, the brightest, the most extraordinary. If he learned about Cassian, he wouldn't just want custody. He'd want to pit his sons against each other to see which one was truly superior. He'd turn their relationship into a competition, their childhood into a proving ground. Evangeline's expression shifted, fear replacing anger as understanding dawned. Her son was valuable to his father because he was exceptional, a mirror of Lysander's own brilliance, the heir to both his fortune and his intellect. But if there was another son, one with an even higher IQ score, one who'd achieved the same results without the benefit of private tutors and prestigious programs, what would that mean for Dorian's position? "This stays between us," I said quietly. "My son gets his exoneration. Your son keeps his status as the Blackwell heir. And both boys get to live their lives without being turned into weapons in their father's ego war." After a long moment, Evangeline nodded stiffly. "Agreed. But keep him away from Dorian. I don't want them forming any kind of bond. No communication, no interaction. They attend the same school, but that's where it ends." "Mom, no." Dorian stepped forward, his voice cracking with emotion. "I've never met anyone who thinks like me, who understands. You can't just take that away." "This conversation is over," Evangeline said, her tone brooking no argument. She grabbed Dorian's arm again, more forcefully this time. Dorian looked back at Cassian as his mother pulled him toward the door. "I'll find a way," he said. "To talk to you. I'll find a way." Then they were gone, the attorney scrambling to follow, leaving behind a wake of tension and unanswered questions. Headmaster Whitmore cleared his throat. "Well, this has been highly irregular. Mrs. Thorne, you'll have your formal exoneration. We'll issue a statement by the end of the week, and Cassian, I apologize for the distress this investigation has caused you. It's clear now that we should have been more thorough before making any accusations." "Thank you," I said, though the words felt hollow. We left the conference room in silence. Dr. Voss walked with us to the parking lot. "That was brave," she said to Cassian, "standing up for yourself like that." "I didn't do it alone," he replied, glancing at me. Dr. Voss turned to me. "Mrs. Thorne, I meant what I said in there. Cassian needs intellectual stimulation that matches his abilities. There are programs, communities for profoundly gifted children, places where he wouldn't have to hide. I'd like to discuss some options with you, if you're open to it." I nodded slowly. "I think I'd like that." 2 weeks later, Julian's name was formally cleared. The school announced that both competition entries were exceptional independent work, and that Westbridge Academy was proud to have two such gifted students. The statement was posted on the school website, sent to all families, read during morning announcements. But the real story played out in smaller moments. The way Dorian found excuses to pass Cassian in the hallways, always offering a quick nod of recognition. The encrypted emails they exchanged, sharing proofs and challenging each other's theorems, carefully hiding their communication from their parents. The way Cassian came alive, finally having someone who understood the language of his thoughts. I found the emails by accident one evening when Cassian left his laptop open. I should have closed it, respected his privacy, but I couldn't help reading. Dorian had written, "My mom says I can't talk to you. She's afraid of what my dad would do if he found out, but I don't care. You're my brother. That means something." Cassian had replied, "I understand if it's too risky. I don't want to cause problems for you. You're not causing problems, our parents are. We didn't ask for any of this, but we found each other anyway, and I'm not giving that up." I closed the laptop, my eyes stinging with tears. These boys, these brilliant, kind boys, were building a relationship despite everything working against them. Dr. Voss called me a month after the hearing. "Mrs. Thorne, I've been thinking about Cassian's situation. There are programs for profoundly gifted children that could offer him the intellectual stimulation he needs without exposing his identity. Online courses through prestigious universities, weekend workshops with mathematicians who ask no questions about family names, a summer program at a research institute where he could finally unleash his full potential. Would you be open to discussing some options?" I was. Slowly, carefully, I allowed Cassian to step into the light. Not the glaring spotlight of being Lysander Blackwell's secret son, but the nurturing glow of communities designed for exceptional minds. Online courses through Stanford and MIT, weekend workshops at the Institute for Advanced Study, a summer program at a research institute where he could work alongside graduate students and postdocs on cutting-edge problems. One evening, I found him on our apartment balcony staring at the city lights. "Do you regret it?" he asked without preamble. "Running away from my father? Raising me like this? Making me hide?" I considered lying, offering easy comfort. But Cassian deserved truth. "I regret that you had to hide who you are. I regret that you've been lonely. I regret that I let fear make me small, and in doing so, made your world small too." I moved to stand beside him. "But I don't regret protecting you from becoming a trophy in someone else's collection. Your father sees genius as a commodity, something to own and display. I wanted you to see it as part of who you are, not all of who you are." "Dorian says his dad barely talks to him unless it's about his achievements," Cassian said quietly. "That he's only valuable when he's being exceptional. That every conversation is about what he's accomplished, what competitions he's won, what programs he's been accepted into. Do you feel that way? Like you're only valuable because of your IQ?" "No," he said immediately. "You've never treated me differently. Even when you didn't know my actual score, you loved me the same. You were proud of me when I helped Mrs. Chen carry her groceries, not just when I solved equations." "Exactly. That's the difference between us and them. In that world, everything has a price tag, including people. Out here, you get to be Cassian, exceptional when you want to be, ordinary when you don't. Free." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I think I want to stop hiding now, though. Dr. Voss says there are programs for kids like me where I could actually be challenged. Learn with people who think the way I do. Dorian told me about this summer program at MIT for profoundly gifted students. They're offering us both full scholarships. We could actually work on research together." My protective instincts screamed warnings. But looking at my son's face, seeing the hope, the excitement, the hunger to finally be himself fully, I knew I couldn't cage him anymore. "Okay," I said. "But we do this smart. Legal protections, clear boundaries with your father's family, and the moment it becomes about competition instead of learning, we pull back." "I know." He hugged me then, something he'd been too cool for lately. "Thank you for keeping me safe, but also thank you for being willing to let me fly." I held him tight, breathing in the scent of his hair, wondering if this was how all parents felt. This strange mixture of pride and terror, of wanting to protect and needing to let go. For 3 months, our new arrangement worked. Cassian thrived in his advanced programs. His friendship with Dorian deepened, carefully contained within encrypted communication and supervised academic settings. Evangeline Ashford maintained her distance, acknowledging me with tight nods when our paths crossed at school events. Both of us guardians of a secret neither wanted revealed. Until the inevitable happened. The letter arrived on a Saturday morning, delivered by private courier. Heavy cream paper embossed with the Blackwell Capital logo. My hands shook as I opened it. Ms. Thorne, I recently learned of Cassian's existence through circumstances I won't detail here. My attorneys inform me I have no legal claim due to the circumstances of his birth and your sole custody. They also inform me that attempting to pursue custody would be expensive, protracted, and ultimately futile given his age and established life with you. I am not writing to make demands. I'm writing because I've spent the past 3 months in intensive therapy, examining my own failures. As a father to Dorian, as a husband, as a man. My therapist, yes I have one now at Evangeline's insistence, suggests I have treated the people in my life as acquisitions rather than individuals, that I valued achievement over humanity. I don't expect forgiveness for how I treated you during our marriage. But I would like the opportunity to know Cassian, if he's willing. Not as an heir or a prodigy or a commodity, just as my son. I understand if your answer is no. I probably deserve nothing less. Lysander Blackwell. I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation, for the trap I knew had to be there. But all I found was something unexpected. Vulnerability from a man who had never shown weakness. Is that from him? Cassian appeared in the doorway, home from his Saturday morning programming club. I handed him the letter, watched his face as he read, seeing emotions flicker across his features. Curiosity, anger, hope, fear. What do you want to do? I asked when he finally looked up. I want to meet him, once. Just to see if he's really changed or if this is just another way to collect what he thinks he owns. He looked at me with those gray eyes so much like his father's, but warmer, kinder. You taught me that people are worth more than their achievements. That love isn't transactional. If he can't understand that, then he doesn't get to be part of my life. But if he can, I finished, then maybe everyone deserves a second chance. How do you face the man you ran from? Not as the woman who feared him, but as the mother who raised his child? 3 weeks later, we sat in a neutral location. A small cafe downtown. Nothing fancy, nothing designed to impress. My choice. If Lysander Blackwell wanted to meet his son, it would be on our terms. I spotted him the moment he entered. Still commanding, still handsome, but somehow smaller than I remembered. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, no suit, no watch worth more than my car, no visible displays of wealth. His eyes scanned the room and found us instantly. His step faltered slightly when he saw Cassian. That's him, Cassian whispered. That's him, I confirmed, squeezing his hand under the table. Lysander approached slowly, as if afraid we might flee. He stopped a respectful distance from our table, his gaze fixed on Cassian. Hello, he said simply. No grand speech, no dramatic declaration. Just a single word laden with 13 years of absence. Hi, Cassian replied. His voice steady despite the slight trembling of his hand beneath mine. May I sit? Lysander gestured to the empty chair. I nodded, and he sat, placing his hands flat on the table. A gesture I recognized from our marriage. It was what he did when trying to appear non-threatening during negotiations. Cassian, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You look like my mother. She was brilliant too. A mathematician before women in STEM were common. She would have loved meeting you. Cassian studied his father with the same analytical intensity he applied to his proofs. Dorian says you're in therapy. A surprised laugh escaped Lysander. 3 times a week. I'm trying to understand why I became the man I did. Why I confused control with love, success with worth. He met my eyes briefly. Your mother tried to tell me once. I didn't listen. Are you listening now? Cassian asked, direct as always. I'm trying to. A hint of vulnerability crossed his face. My therapist says that's a start. The conversation that followed wasn't dramatic or life-changing. It was awkward, tentative, filled with careful questions and cautious answers. Lysander asked about Cassian's interests, his school, his friends. He listened more than he spoke, something the Lysander I'd known never did. When our coffee cups were empty, Lysander cleared his throat. I'd like to see you again, Cassian, if that's something you'd want. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to know you. Cassian looked to me silently, asking permission. That's Cassian's decision, I said, but if it happens, I'll be present. And the moment you start treating him like an acquisition instead of a person, it stops. Lysander nodded. Fair terms? He handed Cassian a business card with a phone number handwritten on the back. This is my personal cell, not my assistant's line, not my office, just mine. You can call anytime or not at all. The choice is yours. As we watched him walk away, Cassian turned to me. He seems different from how you described him. People can change, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what actually matters. What followed wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. It was something quieter, more tentative. A series of supervised visits. Museum trips where Lysander learned to ask Cassian about his interests without turning them into achievements to showcase. Mathematical exhibitions where he practiced being present without agenda. Dinners where three people who shared history but were virtually strangers tried to find common ground. I watched from a distance, ready to intervene if old patterns emerged. But slowly, painfully, Lysander Blackwell was learning what I'd always known. That Cassian's value had nothing to do with his IQ score, and everything to do with the kindness in his heart, the curiosity in his mind, the way he saw the world in patterns of beauty and possibility. 6 weeks into these careful meetings, the inevitable happened. We arrived at the Science Museum to find not just Lysander waiting, but Dorian as well. The brothers froze at the sight of each other, then broke into identical grins. I might have mentioned where we were meeting today, Lysander admitted. And someone insisted on coming along. Mom finally said I could see you outside of school, Dorian told Cassian, after Dad promised not to turn it into some kind of competition between us. I studied Lysander, searching for signs of manipulation. And you agreed to that? I'm learning, he said quietly, so only I could hear. Slowly, imperfectly. But I'm learning that having two extraordinary sons isn't a problem to solve. It's a gift I don't deserve but am grateful for anyway. That day marked a turning point. The carefully separated compartments of our lives began to merge. Evangeline joined us for the next meeting, her wariness mirroring my own. We were two women who had loved and feared the same man, now watching him attempt to become someone new. He's different with them than he was with me, she confessed one afternoon as we sat together, watching the boys and their father examine a mathematical puzzle display. Less evaluating, more present, like he's actually trying to be a father instead of a curator. He's trying, I acknowledged. For their sake. For his own too, I think. She glanced at me. I never hated you, you know? When I realized who Cassian was, I was terrified, not angry. Lysander built his relationship with our son on achievement, not love. I was afraid of what would happen when he discovered another son, one who might outshine his heir. And now? Now I think there's room for both of them to shine without dimming each other. Her smile was small but genuine. Dorian is happier than I've ever seen him. Having a brother, having someone who understands him, it's changed him, made him lighter somehow. Did Lysander become Father of the Year? No. Did he slip back into old habits? Sometimes. There were moments when I saw him comparing the boys, when I heard him ask about test scores or competition results. But he kept trying. And that effort, that genuine attempt to be better, was something I could respect. Meanwhile, Cassian flourished, enrolled in a specialized program for gifted students where hiding wasn't necessary. Started building friendships with kids who valued his sense of humor as much as his mathematical abilities. developed a relationship with his half-brother that was based not on competition, but on collaboration. Their minds working in tandem on problems that left even their mentors bewildered. And me? I learned to let go of fear. To trust that I'd given Cassian a foundation strong enough to venture into the world without losing himself. To believe that love didn't mean protection from every possible harm, but rather the courage to let him face challenges while knowing he could always come home. 1 year later, I stood in the audience at the National Youth Mathematics Competition, watching my son present his work on algebraic topology to a panel of judges that included 2 Fields Medal winners. Beside me stood Lysander Blackwell, his phone put away for once, completely focused on Cassian. On his other side, Dorian was practically vibrating with excitement for his brother's presentation. Evangeline stood beside her son, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Brother. Not half-brother, just brother. They'd claimed each other fully, building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. "He's remarkable," Lysander whispered to me. "He always was," I replied. "You're just finally seeing it." Cassian fielded complex questions from the judges with confidence and grace, explaining his work without arrogance, acknowledging the mathematicians whose work had inspired him. When he finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. As he walked off stage, he looked first to me, and I saw the question in his eyes. "Did I make you proud?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face, but not because of his performance, or the first-place trophy he'd likely win, or the scholarship offers that would inevitably follow. I was proud because despite everything, the hiding, the accusations, the complicated family drama, Cassian had emerged as exactly who he was meant to be. Brilliant, yes, but also kind, curious, humble, free. He found me after the awards ceremony, first-place trophy in hand, surrounded by reporters and representatives from prestigious universities. But he pushed through all of them to reach me first. "We did it, Mom," he said, hugging me tightly. "We really did it." "You did it, sweetheart. This was all you." "No." He pulled back, looking me in the eye. "You believed in me when no one else did. You protected me when I needed protection. You let me fly when I needed freedom. None of this happens without you." Behind him, Lysander, Dorian, and Evangeline waited patiently, understanding that this moment belonged to us, that some bonds were forged in courtrooms and DNA tests, but others were built through years of sacrifice, through quiet nights of homework help, through choosing love over fear every single day. "I have something to tell you," Cassian said, his voice dropping. "Dr. Tanaka from Princeton wants me to work in her lab next summer as an actual research assistant, not just a program participant. She says I have insights that could advance their work on modular forms." "Cassian, that's incredible." "And Dorian got the same offer. We'd be working together." He grinned. "Apparently, 2 genius brothers with similar cognitive patterns make for interesting research collaboration opportunities." I laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness. A year ago, I'd been terrified of this world discovering my son. Now I was watching him step into it with confidence, with support, with his eyes wide open to both its possibilities and its pitfalls. As we walked out of the auditorium together, me, Cassian, Lysander, Dorian, and Evangeline, I realized that this was never really about proving Cassian didn't cheat. That was just the catalyst that forced everything into the light. This was about a mother learning to trust, a father learning to love without controlling, 2 boys learning they were stronger together than apart, and a family, unconventional and complicated, learning that worth isn't measured in IQ points or bank accounts or trophies. It's measured in moments like this, in choosing connection over pride, in believing the best of each other even when it's hard, in building something new from the broken pieces of what came before. Did we all live happily ever after? No, because real life isn't a fairy tale. Lysander still reverted to his controlling ways sometimes. Evangeline and I still disagreed on parenting approaches. The boys faced challenges that genius couldn't solve: social struggles, pressure, the weight of expectations. But we faced them together, and that made all the difference. Because in the end, what saved us wasn't Cassian's genius IQ or Lysander's wealth or my determination. It was something simpler and more profound. The decision to see each other as fully human, flawed, complicated, worthy of grace and second chances. And maybe that's the real story here. Not about the boy who was accused of cheating, or the billionaire father he never knew, or the mother who protected him at all costs, but about the family they chose to become despite everything trying to keep them apart. Sometimes the greatest achievement isn't solving the impossible equation. It's learning that you don't have to solve everything alone. If you've ever been underestimated because of where you came from rather than what you're capable of, I hope this story resonates with you. If you've ever had to fight to prove your worth in a world that judges by appearances and bank accounts, I see you. And if you've ever discovered that the family you build is sometimes more powerful than the family you're born into, you understand why Cassian's story matters. Sometimes true genius isn't measured by IQ points or academic achievements. Sometimes it's measured by the courage to be authentically yourself and the wisdom to let others do the same. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear which part of Cassian's journey resonated with you most. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't determined by what you achieve, but by who you choose to become.